What's going on, guys? It's going to be our summary markets week 92. As always, we're going to talk about SPY, Qs, gold, oil, USC Jpy, Bitcoin, and Ethereum. And then after that, we're going to get into our stock and options watch list. Let's get started. So SPY had a pretty decent week last week. He had a little pullback, which was anticipated. We talked about this in Discord, talked about it on stream. If you guys look at the historical price chart for SPY, you typically have a pullback around that same week in November. Now, basically, Monday and Tuesday sometimes can be read on the historical price chart, but after that, it is pretty much up only for the rest of November and the rest of December. Now, for most of the year, we have been following this historical price chart. Let me pull it up for you guys real quick so you guys can kind of see what I'm talking about. This is the chart right here. And this dates back about 70 years. So it's very accurate. And as you can see for November, we have a little bit of red right here, which is basically that pullback that we just had. And then for the rest of the year, it's pretty much up only. We do have a little bit of a pullback in the beginning of December, which is right around that first week of December. But after that, it's pretty much only green. You have what's called like the Santa Claus rally. So it looks pretty good. If we don't have any bit of a pullback on Monday, Tuesday, then we should be getting a nice little move into that like 472, maybe 475 area on SPY. So we did fill that local gap. So this local gap right here has been filled. If it does want to pull back, there is support around 460, 458. That would be pretty deep, and it would be pretty unusual for November. So I'm not really anticipating a pullback like that. I'm more so anticipating a move into 472 or 475. Okay. So if we do break out of like 470, those would be the targets. Moving forward on Qs, we did fill that local gap. Let's get rid of these short-term targets. Let's go ahead and go down to like a lower time frame here. We can see that we're recovering above the 1 hour pivot and the 1 hour 50 moving average. If we can recover back above like 396, we have a little bit of resistance kind of around this area right here, around 398. If we can hold above 398, then we're looking for an all-time high into 400 and then into that 402 all-time high. Moving on to gold, we're still continuing the downtrend break. You did hit our first target at 1861. Next target would be around 1900 and then 1923. If you get below 1860, probably going to pull back to around 1820. A little bit of a support down in that area there. Moving on to oil, you are still getting a little choppy up here, trying to break this uptrend. You did have a lot of talks with the US and OPEC. They're trying to get them to increase their supply, but there hasn't been any definitive news just yet. If you do break below the OTS trail, I would keep an eye on like 77.70, which is that 50 moving average. If you break below that, then I would start to look for around 75 as support. If we can get back above, I'd say like 82.50, that could start to form kind of a bullish distribution, and then we could push back into like 86. Going on to USC Jpy, last week we had that break of the wedge, and then it failed back down into the wedge, and you retested that wedge beautifully. So the bottom of that wedge acted as support. You had a big pump there. I think that was the bond auction. There was a bond auction last week, which ended up being very bullish for the dollar. And then we popped out of that wedge. So we still have kind of a little bit of a trend happening here, kind of like this trend. If we can break above these lower highs, get into like 114.50, then we should be seeing a nice little breakout into like 116. Bitcoin started to pull back a little bit with that dollar strength. Let me go back to my other Bitcoin chart here. So we broke out of that pennant. We're still bullish as long as this trend is maintained. So we're kind of maintaining this bullish uptrend here. It is getting a little choppy. It's not really showing a whole lot of buy pressure. The Momo is starting to lose its momentum. So if we don't bounce, I'd say by like Wednesday, Thursday, this is probably going to start failing lower. So we want to see a push at least above 66, maybe all-time high around 69. The target would be around 72 if we do break out. If it breaks the trend to the downside, there is strong support at 60,000. Break below 60, and it is not looking too good at that point. Let's go back over here. We're going to go to Ethereum. So Ethereum, for this little trend reversal here, you're actually hitting your first targets and your second targets, and you're kind of topping out on that second stage. The next target would be 53.37. You could also target around 5,000, nice whole number, but above that would be 53. So this trend, we've been in this trend for some time. You can take the trend like that, or you can take the trend kind of like how I have it here. This trend is being broken, so the tighter trend is being broken. But if we go back to the the other trend here, you're actually still respecting it. It's trying to break it now. So if it breaks below this, you have a little bit of support around 44, a little bit of support around 42, and then you could go down to the 50-day, which is around 3,900. But all right, that was the summary markets. Let's go ahead and close this. We're going to move on to our options in stock watch list. We're going to start off with Asana. Asana still continuing with strength here above 131. It looked very strong in a 140. And then our final target, or sorry, not final target, our next target is 148 and then 153. Looks very strong. Watch for that short-term momentum. If it starts climbing, it looks really good. Crowd is still failing this pivot. It's unbelievable the amount of resistance that it has here around 286 to 290. If you break above 290, look for that 300 to 305 target. But this pivot is really holding you down. Target looks pretty good here. It can break above, what is that, 261.70. If it can break above this high here, I would start looking for an all-time high break into like 268. But it needs to get above that level. You also have earnings coming up, so watch out for that. Airbnb also looking really good. You broke above that pivot above 201. If you can hold above 202, the next target is 220. Overstock still looking really good. You broke out of that weekly triangle. It gave you a little bit of a pullback on the daily down to the pivot. The pivot was actually a beautiful bounce zone. I was hoping for a break of the pivot down to the triangle, but it's just too strong. So if it holds above these pivots, above 98 to 100, you're probably going to break into 110. And then your next high is at 124. All right, moving on to AMD. Looks really good. You held above that pivot at 144. If you can get above this little gap, which is, let's see, like 149, your next target would be the 155 high and then 160. Next up is Net. Net is bouncing off the original breakout point. You can see we kind of had a little bit of a consolidation here, and then we broke out, and now we're retesting that consolidation. Okay, so the next target would be around 208 to 210, and then next would be 218 to 221. Those targets have already been hit, but those zones are still going to act as resistance. Moving on to Snow, we've been preaching this one for months now. Hopefully you guys have been able to catch this uptrend. We've been talking about this ever since like 220. The final target on this has been the pivot. And as we always say, these really long pivots that have not been retested, they act as magnets, okay? So this price right here is just a magnet pulling price all the way back into it. So that target would be around 390 to 395. Once that has been hit, you're looking for all-time high, which is 430. This trend is ridiculously strong. It's been maintaining the trend the entire way up. So as long as that trend holds, there's basically no reason to doubt that we're going to see that pivot and we're going to see that all-time high. Shopify was one that I gave you guys earlier, or I think it was like later in the week last week, maybe Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We called it out on the scanners. It was looking at pretty good for a breakout. You broke above that pivot above 1510, and then you just went straight to all-time high. 12% day, ridiculous day for Shopify. If we grab a fib right here, these would be your next targets. So 1703, 1730, and then 1840. Okay, you have to maintain above 1560 or it's getting weak. All right, moving on to my current holdings. Nasty earnings on Coupang. We did lose our profit on our shares, but we are going to get max profit on our premium. And then once that expires, we're going to go ahead and sell some more premium on that. SQM still consolidating. If it can hold above this pivot, it's looking like it wants to send into 70. Got to watch out for earnings on that. Next up is Uranium. You're kind of retesting this previous high. If you can stay above the previous high, above 29.76, you should be able to break out into that 31.60 and then probably around 33. Wolf went for a breakout. Now we are pulling back to retest the pivot. So the pivot can hold as support. If it does, look for 26 to 27. Break the pivot. You have a whole ton of support around 23. Meta breaking the pivot, retesting it beautifully, almost to the penny, and then launching off of it. This is what we call a launch pad pivot, when you have those pivots retested and then you just launch off of them. If you can break above the all-time high, above 1650, look for that 17 whole dollar. PayPal finally starting to get a bounce. We did add on around 200, so we almost got a perfect add here. I think it was around 201 or 201.50, somewhere around there. My average is still underwater. But we're looking to hold this at least until 300. Coinbase looked really good, had bad earnings reaction, but it looks like it's going for a gap fill. If you can fill that gap, maintain above the gap, then we're looking for all-time high. This trend is very strong as long as you maintain above the anchored VWAPs, so above the low and above the IPO, which is at 305 and 280. This should just start to continue an uptrend into all-time high. Last up for our holding is UUP. We had a really nice week last week. These are actually positive, like 20% now. We've been holding these contracts since March. So almost an entire year we've been holding these contracts. And basically what I'm doing is I'm playing the weekly on Dixie. So Dixie looked like it was bottoming out here back in March. You can see back in March it started to bottom. And we started to buy these contracts. It went down. We bought more. That's March of, is that the correct March? Yeah, that's the correct March. So we started accumulating these, and then it's been doing quite well ever since. But you haven't been moving enough to really give us a massive profit. It's been kind of chopping the contracts out. But if it starts to push away from this level, and it starts to get to like, say, 96, we are going to get paid massively, okay? So keep an eye on those. We are trading the $25 contracts for January. $25 calls. All right, last but not least, let's go into big tech. Your big support on Microsoft for this week is that 330 level. Break 330, you'll look to get into 325. Break above 338, and let's see, long term, you're looking at 350 as your target. Short term would be about 342. Nice bounce on Apple. Your resistance for the week is going to be 150. Hold above that. You should be getting 152 to 154. If you break below the support around 147.50, you're gonna probably get 145. Facebook, your support for the week would be around 325. Break below that, you're probably gonna get 316 to 317. Break above 345, you should get 357. Netflix, your support for the week would be around 353. Break below that, you'll probably get 653. Break below that, you'll probably get 630. The resistance would be around 680, probably 690. Your target would be 701. Amazon resistance 3551 to 3597, targeting 3659. Tesla, your support would be 1000. Break below that, you have a little bit of support around like 970, 980, and then target 910. Resistance would be 1100. Break above that, look for 1175 into 1221. All right, guys, that was the summary markets. Make sure to hit that like button if you liked the video, and I will be seeing you guys in Discord tomorrow at 9:30 in the morning, or for our live stream at 3 p.m. Eastern. See you later.